Hello viewers. Well, the F1 2017 season is soon going to be upon us, and now I'm joined by our F1 reporter Tim Goodchild, and we're going to look at a preview of the upcoming year, besides a look back at 2016 and the many things that happened there as well. The transformation over the winter as we look forward to the new season. So, Tim, thanks for joining us today, and I guess you're going to be the man sort of taking us through the various different bits and pieces as we look forward to this year. But first, we were going to have a look at the 2016 season. So I guess your thoughts first on 2016 and where we left F1 last year.
Thank you, Alan, and it's great to be here today to talk about Formula One and what I think is going to be a very exciting new start to the new look Formula One for this year. After sort of 3 years of, should we say, Mercedes dominance, and whether that will continue, we'll wait to be seen. But 2016 was a good year as a whole. There was some great races, and having watched many F1 review, be it on Sky or the official F1 release Blu-ray over Christmas, there were some great races, and I think Austria last year, for example, was a terrific battle from start to finish. Certainly the highlight race of the year for me, and seeing Hamilton chase down Rosberg in those last few laps, and the rather dubious overtake or attempt to overtake on Hamilton by Rosberg, or he was defending the lead on that last lap, was fantastic action. So hopefully we get to see more of that sort of wheel-to-wheel action this year. But Rosberg, I mean, was he a worthy champion? I think clearly he has been fighting for a championship win for his entire career. Little did we know that it was going to be just the one title for him that would satisfy his desires. But the question really is, it's a shame that you won't have a defending champion in the sport this year. He'll be remembered as a one-hit wonder, maybe. Finally won many races. He's a proven race winner, but he will forever go down in legacy as being like his dad. Won one title, move on, and I think he'll become quite forgettable.
Well, I think Nico's one of those guys who did what he needed to do. He won when he had the opportunity to win. He was, I would say, solid and stable when he's driving throughout the season, but ultimately unspectacular. Once he knew he had it in the bag, he just looked at the points and said, "I'm happy to come in second place." He wasn't all about the winning, and so there really wasn't much Lewis could do to take it back to him in terms of the championship last year. So I think, in terms of his driving, I mean, some would say in terms of Alain Prost years ago, he was quite similar. He would look at the points and consider the situation, use the rules to the maximum to say, how to maximise his advantage over his opponent. And I think in this case last year, it may have been unspectacular, but then Lewis has been in a very similar position where he's been in a dominant position the 2 years beforehand. So either way, whatever people say, Nico went out there with equal machine, and he delivered. He had to win those points and win those races and deliver in some of those different qualifying sessions, good races and bad. He had his own mix, and he came through as the world champion. So a great year for Nico, but in terms of his long-term sort of name within the sport, I think, like you say, he hasn't really left an indelible mark on the sport for his driving prowess at the limit, put it that way. And I think it's almost a shame, because we'd love to have seen him going for it a little bit more at times,
But I think seeing his reaction or the change in him in terms of his personal life, himself on social media after he's won the title, all of a sudden he's got this personality that was never existent in Formula One. It's a shame that didn't come through more when he was driving, because you ever saw him on TV interviewed after races, he always came across as quite a depressed individual. He always looked quite insular in himself, and there was never real that sort of. I could never really bond with him. Although I always felt that a Hamilton-Rosberg lineup for years, and I hoped it was going to come to fruition when Hamilton was at McLaren. I thought that would be a brilliant lineup. They were old casting buddies, and they came through the ranks together, and they've always been friends. But to be a part of a team, I thought an awesome lineup. But the tension over the last 3 years, has been almost a little bit too much at times. And I think you're racing. That's your job. There's more to life than this. But you've got to. I just found it almost like came to an impasse, and I think so. When he did announce his retirement, there was part of me that just wasn't surprised. So he is leaving. I mean, I think we do need to raise a point. Is so I watched the official F1 review Blu-ray at Christmas. I mean, the title of the disc was "They Did Their Best." I mean, surely a championship realised or a dream realised.
They did their best.
I mean, the marketing gurus at Formula One, clearly they're going the same way as Bernie at the moment.
I mean, you imagine sitting around a table and saying, right, guys, spectacular F1 season. We've got to make it look exciting. What do we think around the table? Well, I suppose they did their best. I mean, it's not like they could do any more, is it, against Rosberg? And there really wasn't any. They did their best. That's how it is. Did their best. And I think, well, it should read, he did his best in a way. I mean,
exactly.
It would have been equally non-spectacular, but neither was the style of winning in that sense. So it was a very dull, played down event. And I think that in terms of describing a season, I mean, it used to always be quite cynical. We used to have Clive James doing the VHS tapes years ago. And Clive James was always very cynical about, in a fun way, he loved his Formula One, but he always, there was always his sort of dry sort of humour to it. And I kind of felt there was almost that to this as well. There was a sigh, a shrug of the shoulders. They did their best, and he's gone now from the sport. So let's just kick it out there and move on to the next season.
And you can't help but think that sort of lack of innovation on a title kind of sums up where Formula One was at the end of last season. It was just like Bernie, well, he's done his best over the last number of years, but he's given up. Formula One in general, sort of the motivation around it. I mean, I'm a passionate fan of the sport, but we're great at rubbishing our sport at the same time, and I think it's just so demoralising at times when you sort of see how many negatives are put upon the sport, and I think it's unfair because I personally can't stand football, but I don't see FIFA or the FA finding out ways of how to encourage me to sort of start watching football, so why can't we sort of leave that a little bit more? So I think to bring this on to thinking about Bernie, his days are up in terms of Formula One, and Liberty Media, who we thought were going to be closing out their purchase of Formula One well into 2017, suddenly closed the deal back in January of this year, and it's full steam ahead. Chase Carey has come in as the CEO of Formula One. Bernie has been given this rather elaborate title that no one really quite understands what it is, called Chairman Emeritus. It's sort of the person that was doing the job, but they've just been given an honourable title.
It's the the gracefully leaving chairman, leaving with grace, sort of thing.
Yes, well, I don't think he's going to really have much of an input this year and moving forward. Which, I mean, I think it's quite funny. I've followed all of this story with great interest, watched reports and read articles on the likes of Autosport and Pit Pass, and you see lots of people who are all of a sudden saying how wonderful job that Bernie has done over these years. And it's like, granted, he brought the sport from nothing into a commercial success, but it's been stagnant for the past 10 years, really. And ever since the digital revolutions arrived, the management of Formula One have not really understood it, and I think we are losing out massive opportunity where Liberty Media can step in.
I think just go back a few years ago. I remember when they were saying they wouldn't be able to make Formula One HD until 2017, HD, and then they realised, oh, we've already got HD cameras. Oh, we can do HD next year then. Now, a lot of people have forgotten that, but that was meant to be a slow phased-in option of HD, which would have probably cost a fortune as they saw it back then. Now, of course, you have 4K, but that's a different thing entirely. But in terms of embracing the internet, there was a few things that Formula One tried years ago, perhaps a bit ahead of their time. They've had some concepts, but there doesn't seem to have been any consistent understanding of the internet. And this is where Liberty Media is coming in now. And in a way, it's the reason why we're doing this podcast now. We're actually able to start covering Formula One in various different ways, we hope, in the years to come, in terms of media and actual access and lots of other options that can be presented to the media now that was closed off completely under Bernie's reign for so many years. And it's stifling the sport. It's stifling it, especially with YouTube. I mean, when a fan pays to go to an event and they film an angle that the TV cameras didn't get, of a bit of action that the TV cameras didn't get, well, good for the fan. They've paid for it. I mean, no one's arguing that whether they should monetize the video. You can argue, fine, you're not allowed to monetize it, but at least you can show your video that you filmed by paying your £200 for your ticket at the event, of a piece of footage that no TV camera got, that goes up a week after the race.
Yeah.
There's lots they can do to embrace the internet without it infringing on the rights of the big TV companies and stuff. So I hope that we see a more global F1, a more approachable F1. And going back to your point on Rosberg, PR is so controlling in the sport that almost when someone says something that's not PR, the media come down on that person. And I think there needs to be more leeway for people to just be who they are without constantly being judged by the media, by the audience all the time. But it's a very tricky situation. The audience on the one hand say, we want less PR. But as soon as someone says something that's not PR, and I'll give you a good example, is this week Nico Hulkenberg made a joke about why he left Force India because the car was pink. Now, it was a joke. It was just a joke. He gets on perfectly well with Force India. They get on like house on fire, apparently. If you're a keen follower of Formula One, you'll often see Formula One teams pulling each other's legs on Twitter about things. But then I saw news reports about Hulkenberg being anti-pink and how it wasn't male and all the rest of it. So you've taken what was a casual joke, a non-PR joke, and you've changed it into something that's aggressive and that's serious. And that's the problem with not just the lack of PR, but with the media in terms of how they interpret what certain people say. So I think Liberty Media certainly got a lot of work on their plate to change things. I welcome the fact they've come in so soon. I think looking back on Bernie's career, he's done wonderful things for Formula One. But I kind of feel that if he had left Formula One in 2010 or even 2012, during the V8 era even, so why don't we just say the V8 era, I think no one would have really had anything to worry about. I do think these last few years that F1 just hasn't moved forward in quite the way it should have as a technically advantaged sport. It should be technically advanced in every way in terms of the technology runs throughout. I mean, the computer systems they use and technology is immense behind the scenes. So in terms of technicians and knowledge, they've got it there. But certainly, I think it's been great to see what Bernie has achieved, but I think now is the right time for Liberty to take on.
And I think just on a couple of points there, Liberty Media, one of the first things they've done already this year is within the testing, they've opened up the social media channels to all of the teams. So let's take Hamilton. He has millions and millions of followers, be it on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. At the launch of the Mercedes team car this year, it was a very low-key affair, but they embraced VR. You had a full 360 degree video which you could watch on a VR headset, and it was great. It was new, it was different, and no other team was doing it. And then you got to see an onboard video of Lewis taking the car around Silverstone for a lap, and it was you don't sort of see this stuff done before. Then we go to testing, and you find out that all of the teams are suddenly doing all of these videos behind the scenes footage on all of their social media feeds, and then we find out that Liberty Media have stepped in and said we're allowing access for people to post videos. Now, I can only hope that they take that to the next step and allow fans to upload videos and photos of any footage that they find whilst they're in the grandstands, and not have within 24 hours that's be blocked by FOM. I mean, even Hamilton, he's tried to upload videos in the past and it's been blocked by FOM. So hopefully that we get to see a new engagement level from Liberty that will allow Formula One to grow its audience away from the official channels.
Yeah, I mean, I will just note, actually, Nico Rosberg was in the pits this week, and he had a really good angle with the car going out around him. And so thanks to Liberty Media, I can actually show this now. It's a footage that no one else would have. It's not costing anyone. It's not on TV anyway. And he's not monetizing it as anything. And you think, yes, we should be allowed to see this kind of footage. So that's a really, really good step.
And the TV companies shouldn't be afraid of this. They should embrace it. They should use fan footage as part of their coverage. To add the extra level of insights and coverage level that you wouldn't normally get. So, I personally hope that Liberty go to the next level and provide an official streaming service. So there was a part of me that says, I don't have to pay money to Sky for television coverage, but to be able to give money direct to Formula One or Liberty for whatever monthly subscription to have an F1 channel, but to see live races over the internet, give me that,
Yeah, I mean, that's another issue, isn't it? I mean, I personally don't think Formula One should have moved away from terrestrial television. They had up to 12 million viewers when Jenson Button won his race. Now they're somewhere around 2, something like that.
4, yeah.
4 now, 4.
Yeah.
And they lost quite a few million viewers last year as well. And so for the sponsors of Formula One, they just don't get the exposure that they used to get. So, I mean, Formula One might be making more money from the TV companies, but the sponsors are not making more money from the TV companies. So that's certainly an issue that's going to be looked at.
Yeah, I agree. So, we wait with interest to see what Liberty Media brings. There won't be any grand changes, obviously, to the cars this year, probably not next year, because these aren't just simple things that you can put together. So, the current commercial agreements are up in 2020, so we may have a number of years to wait. But Ross Brawn is back. He is leading the technical charge for Formula One. There are early murmurings that there will be a change in the engine regulations. Do we go back to a naturally aspirated engine of sorts? We will see. But we will await to see what happens there. But there is a feeling for 2017 that there's a new start, a new energy within the sport already. It's only Bernie that's gone. The funny thing is, and Ross has come in, but we still don't really know what's going to happen. And we've got these new look cars coming in this year. Wonderful thick tyres, very sort of retro 80s feel and look to them. Lots of people saying, will there be any more overtaking? Don't know. Probably not. But we don't know. Certainly around Monaco, I don't think there'll be any.
No, I think it's going to be tricky around Monaco, isn't it? I mean, on the one hand, there's more mechanical grip, but there's so much more aero grip as well. And it all depends on how the air comes off the car in front, how close they can follow. And, I still don't think they've done enough there. The front wings are looking ever more complex this year. Just a quick thing on Ross Brawn. I mean, it's excellent that we have a brain of his size now that's going to be monitoring the sport, moving it forward. He knows what needs to be done to reduce costs. He's talked about this in the past. He knows what needs to be done to improve the racing. And I think in terms of teams cutting corners, he'll know all the tactics that they use before they do. So I think changes will come, but as you say, it's going to be a sort of 3-4 years. I think Formula One 2020 will be very different from Formula One we have today. But it's nice to see these big fat wheels. I have to admit, seeing testing has been really exciting. Seeing these new cars, I've liked seeing them. I've liked seeing them going faster as well. They're going faster again.
They had the pole time at Barcelona in 2016 was 1 minute 22 flat, and you had the Ferrari going round in a low 118. I was watching, so I was rewatching the Austrian Grand Prix last week, and they were doing lap times of 108. That around there weren't that many corners around the A1 ring, but potentially we could see lap times there of like 104, 105, and that is almost a little bit scary. That the pace of development on the cars for 2017 and the regulations allowing such a drop in lap times. We're going to see some records tumbling this year, that's for sure.
We will. I mean, just to put in perspective, what was that? 4 seconds roughly quicker, 3.9 seconds, whatever it was, quicker than the testing. They're not even running the engines at full capacity.
Absolutely.
They're not running the full aero. When they come back to Spain later this year, I think we'll be seeing 116s. Maybe even faster than that. So I think when you if you put that onto the A1 ring, a Red Bull ring as it is now, you could be looking at maybe 102s, 101s. It could even get that quick if they really optimise their cars between now and then. Great to see. I want to see drivers sweating when they get out of the car. So back in the day when Mansell was racing and Senna, they would crawl out of the cars. They'd be sweating. It had been killing them. They'd got out of that car. They couldn't do another lap. They would be that exhausted. These days, the guys jump out of the car and say, "I can do another Grand Prix in half an hour."
Yeah.
That's no good. I want to see these guys physically tested. And I think this year, with the cars going quicker than they've been used to, it's going to test them a bit more physically. I mean, obviously they're training really hard now, but we need the cars to get faster again.
And I think the interesting thing from Pirelli is the tyres are a lot more durable. Now, I'm not sure whether I missed something last year saying that they wanted more durable tyres, but perhaps the flip side of that is you're not going to see a massive drop off. So drives are going to be able to pound around the circuit flat out constantly for the whole race, as opposed to tyre management, which I think has been a bugbear for a lot of races in recent times. So to echo your point, Alan, to see drivers slugging it out for 70 odd laps constantly, full pace. We want to see. I don't want to say we want to see some broken necks, but we want to see people getting to the end of the race and going, "Oh my gosh, thank God that's over."
Really pushing to the limit. That's it. I mean, the only thing I don't know at the moment this season is the how the fuel's going to work out. Nobody's talking about the fuel. I mean, we're always talking about how much fuel they had, especially the Honda engine, but we'll get to that in a bit. We always wondered. So this year, I mean, if they've worked out the fuel and the way it works better now, then obviously, like you say, seeing the drivers pushing harder in these new cars will be great. Lots of power. I'm really looking forward to it, and hopefully it'll improve the spectacle and the sound as well. So they are sounding a bit better than they have done previously, just a bit. Obviously, it's not the V8s, it's not the V10s, but it's certainly better.
So before we go into sort of talking about 2017 properly with our sort of team by team look, let's just talk about I think the very sort of sad news from my side or over the closed season was the demise of Manor F1. When Virgin Racing came into the sport back in 2010 under this promise of a cost cap and premise and the promise of delivering an F1 team, alongside back then it was Lotus and HRT, wasn't it? My memory's going a bit there, but Manor or Virgin Racing back then was always the team which you felt that it had true racers at the heart of the team, with Graham Loudon and
Graham Loudon, the nicest man in F1. We've got to say it. What a nice guy.
Absolutely.
We love Graham.
Yes. So to see them go through the ups and downs, certainly when you had the Sainsbury's guy, Fitzpatrick, buy out the team at the end of last year, you thought, perhaps this is the end of 2015, you thought this was going to be the start of a new look Manor. They're keeping the name. Admittedly, they're livery did look like LWT television channel, but that side they had a nice setup. It was very tightly unit team. 220 employees. Still not a small company. This is the baffling thing. They were back of the grid, but they still had a large workforce. So it's a real shame to see that they aren't able to continue. I mean, they released that wonderful photo of their mock-up car for the wind tunnel for 2017, which I read this morning that they're actually going to be auctioning off. But there's some great talent there. But the realities of Formula One is you need a minimum of 100 million to put two cars on a track, which is wrong in its own right. I think it's a shame that the money exists in Formula One for them to have survived. Liberty Media probably come in a little bit too late to change things around to save Manor, but I know Alan will agree with me here that Formula One, we're heading into 2017 with only 10 teams. We want to. I remember back in the early 90s when you had pre-qualifying to just you had like 18, 19 teams, and you had to whittle the teams down to 13 teams, 26 cars to qualify for the weekend. We want to see that back.
We do want to see that back. I mean, the thing is, there was a lot more cars on the grid. There was a lot more overtaking for the leaders. There wasn't blue flags. They had to actually overtake a car when they came up against it, and they were lapping
Bring that back.
I mean, obviously, if you're overtaking somebody, the cars wouldn't want to battle too hard, but sometimes they might, and it was their right to do so. They were in the same race. So I think that I would like to see blue flags removed.
Totally.
I think it would add so much more to the race to see the cars overtaking each other. I mean, yes, it would be a battle for a Mercedes to overtake certain cars. They'd be coming up, and it would be tough, and it would change the structure of the race. But that's how it was. That's how these great champions that you saw with Senna and Prost and Mansell, the overtakes that they did, some of them were absolutely crazy at the time. They had to just throw the car in there, hell for leather, to keep their leads and their advantage. So, but like you say, very sad to see Manor go. But let's hope the Liberty changes, that we get more cars on the grid. And I think, as I was saying about Ross Brawn, once he figures out how to reduce the costs, of which there's plenty of options there, and also the power units, they are going to drop year on year, but they need some kind of stability to drop the cost, because £50 million a year on up to £80 million on engines. Yeah. It really is a ridiculous amount on engines.
Absolutely. So let's start talking about 2017. Perhaps just before we start doing that, just a momentary consideration for John Surtees, who very sad loss to us, and was a great figure within the paddock. World champion on 2 wheels and 4. Would love to see that happen again, but I think it's going to be a record that's going to stand test of time, I think. But great respect to the old boy, and he'll be a big loss.
Great man, great driver, and he was one of the legends. So many of those legends didn't survive that era, and how he came through 2 lethal eras of racing, and was a very well respected man and a gentleman, and a loss to the world of motorsport.
Okay, so 2017, 10 teams, largely unchanged lineup across the grid, but we'll go through each team one by one and talk about their potential merits and how we think they'll be going through the season. So we'll start off with the current constructors champions, Mercedes, and their lineup of Lewis Hamilton gunning for his 4th World Championship, and probably the most interesting seat, and certainly will be the most interesting performance will be to be in Melbourne, will be Valtteri Bottas, who's leaving Williams to take Rosberg's seat at Mercedes. So, what do you think, Alan? Is it same as?
I actually think it's a great lineup. I think if you look at Bottas's record, it's very difficult for a driver to shine when they're in a mid-pack team.
Yeah.
I think, look at Daniel Ricciardo. He was. I wouldn't say that Daniel really shone until he got the chance at Red Bull in a good car to show what he's capable of. That guy is an amazing driver, a wonderful talent. And I think Bottas, if you look at his record against Massa, he annihilated Massa. Massa had a couple of podium finishes, which on the points made it look a bit more equal. But if you look at the overall results over the last couple of years, Bottas has been very strong indeed. So I think in terms of taking that to Lewis, I think it's going to be a tough challenge. I think also what Bottas has shown is that he's just not phased by psychology. I can tell he's just solid. I go fast. And there really is not much more than that. He's just solid in terms of his speed. But it's going to be interesting to see, because we've not seen him under the full pressure of winning races, of going for a championship. It's going to be interesting to see how the pressure affects him. But he does have experience. He does have speed. He does have ability there and self-worth in terms of his ability to win the championship. And I think it's going to be a very tough competitor for Lewis this year.
And I think that's a great thing. I mean, anyone that knows me knows that I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan, and I'm smiling as I say that. But no, I'm genuinely excited about this lineup, and I don't think it's going to be the Lewis Hamilton show, far from it. And I don't think Lewis wants it to be the Lewis Hamilton show either. He's always said in interviews, it's like, I don't want to be, winning every single race. He wants the challenge and so on. And I think Bottas is incredibly reliable. He's only on a 1-year deal, and that's probably done because there are a lot of contracts up at the end of this year. But what a great way to almost like, this is his interview. This is his 1-year assessment. Now if he won the title, well, it's an easy decision. But even if he delivered consistent podium results, or at least close to Hamilton, you can't argue that level of performance, and he's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper than an Alonso or a Vettel or another champion that's out there.
Well, his test times have been very consistent. If you looked at, if you saw his lap times throughout testing, very, very consistent, doing exactly what the team told him to do, holding it that lap within a couple of tenths every lap. I would say really impressed. It was a sort of performance I used to see from Jenson Button. When Jenson Button was on, especially on a good weekend, Jenson used to just be amazing. Every lap was very consistent, but he always needed that car to be tuned just right and set just right. But when he was on that zone, he was amazing. And I saw that with Bottas in testing. Bottas is obviously a bit more flexible, but his consistency was really there. So it'd be interesting to see how consistently fast he is in comparison to Lewis. But either way, a great pairing, I think, for this year again. Very strong pairing for Mercedes.
Absolutely. So I think that's about it, really, to say for Mercedes. I mean, they are. I think a lot of the other teams are saying they are still the team to beat, and we'll see whether that's true. I mean, as with everything, we can make as many predictions as we can, but we all need to see what qualifying brings next Saturday in Albert Park. But Mercedes, I think, are definitely going into this season as the number one team. Hamilton, big question marks really over whether he will continue to, whether he will lead the team. Will he remain at Mercedes after this year? Big question marks. I think there could be a lot of changes, but we'll move on to the next team, which is Red Bull. Daniel Ricciardo, Max Verstappen, at least starting the season as a Red Bull driver. Obviously, last year he started as Toro Rosso and came into the team after the Russian Grand Prix. But I think they're quite quietly confident. I think they're initially saying that they're not on pace with Ferrari or Mercedes, but it's another Adrian Newey designed car. The chassis is looking very tight. I mean, the overhead views of that car, the back of that car is incredibly well packaged. But is the Renault engine there in terms of performance?
It's always been the weakness for them. I mean, Adrian Newey. Adrian Newey is the greatest car designer there's ever been, and with with an underpowered engine, he's still got Renault. We've still got the Red Bull great results over the last couple of years. They've been very competitive. I mean, Daniel Ricciardo last year again, still quietly doing his thing. This year, obviously, there's more aero now on the car. I think it's fair to say that in terms of, we've not seen the aero yet, obviously, because he keeps it all secret during testing. But the Red Bull that you see in Australia will be vastly superior to the Red Bull you've seen testing in Barcelona. So I think if it depends on the engine power from Renault, it depends on the consistency. Renault haven't had a great test, honestly. They've had quite a few issues with the engine for both the Renault team and the Red Bull team. But if anyone can do it, Adrian Newey can. Red Bull, definitely ones to watch. They might not have shone during testing, but we'll see where they are in the race. I think they're going to be a lot closer, but we just don't know on that engine yet. That's the only thing.
Yeah, and then obviously we've got Ricciardo, who I think we're both fans here of Daniel.
Love him.
He's a brilliant driver, great personality.
Great guy.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose that's one thing which sorry to hark on about Liberty, but I hope drivers are allowed to show their personalities a lot more. They're not sort of gagged, should we say?
No.
So let's see more emotion from these guys. Ricciardo, Verstappen. I mean, I still feel like Verstappen needs to prove himself personally. I think he's a very lucky guy. He's come through the ranks. Look, there's no denying that he's got some raw talent, but he is learning his racecraft at the top end of motorsport. And I do still feel that he's got a good number of years before we see what he's really worth. I mean, the potential is interesting now, but I'm not his number one fan. But that might be down to an age thing. I'm 37. I'm not sure whether I can really support an 18-year-old yet.
Do you know, that is a thing about motorsport, which I remember that Martin Brundle used to complain constantly when Jenson Button came into sport, that Jenson was too young, he's too young. He had a real issue with it. Now we've got ever younger drivers coming into Formula One. And years ago, a Formula One driver would have been close to 30 before they made it to Formula One, because they had to gain so much experience from various forms of motorsport. When they got to Formula One and they got in the car, they had to know mechanically how the car worked. They had to build everything. They practically had to build it. They had to know how to build the car. So when they went on track, they had to come back with detailed feedback on how to fix it. Now they've got computer sensors in everything. So they pretty much set the car up for you. So when you get in the car, largely it's about what do you need to drive the car rather than how does it actually work. So in that sense, the age and knowledge and experience is reduced, and it's much more like a video game now than it's ever been before. Max plays lots of video games, probably watched this channel from time to time, and now, like you say, he's got the opportunity he has. So in the same way, he had some wonderful, exciting races, but I think ultimately Ricciardo was always coming through with good results. And I think that this year Max needs to, I think every now and again he just needs to relax a bit. You've done what you can. You don't need to stress the car. Bring it home. In a way, he's a polar opposite of Rosberg. And he just needs to, I think, relax now and again, bring it home, get the results, get the finishes under his belt and build on that. And I think this is a character-building year for Max. So I think if he has lots of crashes and bashes, he's going to go for overtakes like nobody else. I mean, it's going to be great to see him doing that. It's going to make some real action this year. But at the same time, I think it's going to be character-building in terms of where he's going in terms of his F1 championship aspirations for the future. Exciting pairing, though. Yeah. Very exciting.
You're only as good as your last race. I think is until you've won a championship. I think that's always a thing to remember. And I think with Verstappen, just on one final point for me on this is, yes, he does make some great overtakes, but I don't find his defensive driving is particularly stellar. No. And you can quite often see a driver will be coming up or already know which way he's going to go and will go on the undercut. And
I felt very strongly about one incident last year when Max cut up Kimi at Hungary, and he clearly moved 3 times, and the stewards didn't do anything about it. I thought that is total inconsistency, and he broke the front wing or damaged the front wing on the Ferrari at the time. I think that's definitely something that's going to be looked at more closely this year. He might have been given a bit of slack now and again by a couple of stewards, but F1 themselves need to be more consistent in terms of how they apply rules this year. He does need to tone that defensive driving down, especially with these big wheeled, wider new cars. I mean, it's going to be a lot more challenging to overtake. So we'll see.
So let's move on to the Scuderia, the prancing horse. Will the horse be out the stables, galloping this year?
Amazing testing. I mean, the testing they've come out with incredible testing times. The car it's not breaking down. It's been so reliable. They've got tons of data. Everybody seems to be in a good place in that team. Everybody seems to be happy.
So that means they're going to qualify 10th in Melbourne, does it?
Well, no, you know what? It's very difficult to say, but you have to put them up there in terms of they're going to be in that top 6, battling with Red Bull. And I mean, it might be in Australia that if Renault are still struggling with the engine, that Red Bull are sort of 5th and 6th, that Ferrari are 3rd and 4th, battling for 1st and 2nd. But we don't know. The thing is, again, I think Mercedes have been holding their pace back. I think Mercedes have got a lot more speed in that car. So I'm still looking at a Mercedes front row unless it rains. And I think that Ferrari, I think their consistent race pace is excellent. So they could be going for the win in terms of race pace. It all depends on how they treat their tyres. And that's something which we've not had enough information on in terms of, yes, they're more durable, but how durable and how can the cars push on them in various different conditions. And it's always very different in race conditions when you've got, it's much more rubbered up, and also temperatures are very different as well. So I have to wait and see on that. But no, so far, good package, great consistency from Kimi and Sebastian. And I, as ever, they're a solid pairing. Ferrari need a good year. Let's get that straight.
Absolutely. And, the F1 fan in me, really wants to see Mercedes versus Ferrari. I mean, that is two most synonymous names in automotive history, really. And I think, go back to 2015, when Vettel joined the team, and there were some great performances from him, and he obviously won a couple of races. And I just remember a couple of scenes where you'd see a real sort of mutual respect between Lewis and Seb on the podium, clinking the champagne bottles, and you think, that you want to see that, two opposing teams, a great respect for each other's talents, and I really want to see that back, and throw in Red Bull as well. We want to see, proper, cross team battles, not inter-team battles. I think that's where I really want to see why I want to see Ferrari do well. Like Alan said, that they need to have a good year. They need to win races this year. Kimi Räikkönen, I'm still in two minds whether Kimi Räikkönen is a worthy champion. I know that probably won't go down well with a lot of people. My view is I like Kimi, but in my eyes he's always performed well when the team is an underdog. I mean, his when he was driving for Lotus back in 2012, I think it was, great performances. When he was back in McLaren in 2004, 2005, great performance. They weren't expected to win anything, but he came through. He lucked into a championship, dare I say it, in 2007. It should have been Alonso or Hamilton, really. And he was, 17 points behind with 2 races to go. So I want to see Raikkonen do well.
It's funny you say that. I mean, Kimi's someone, even in these last couple of years, he's not had the consistency. He's had quite a few crashes and offs. There were times last year he had a very poor start to the year, but he came through strong in the second part of the year. I think Kimi,
when his job was on the line,
exactly,
basically.
When his job was on the line, and I think Kimi does often show a lack of enthusiasm. We all know.
I don't know what you mean. I mean, I'm
exactly. Exactly. The car was fast today, of course, and tomorrow the car will be faster, and I'm sure that we will be down the podium, but I'm not sure if we will make it. There is always that tone, isn't there? Yeah. There's never the enthusiasm. But then again, I always used to think that about Nigel Mansell. He had that similar, I was racing against it, and then he was on the inside, and I thought, well, I might as well get down on the inside there myself, you know. And they'd be travelling at 220 mile an hour, whatever stupid speeds. We're talking near death, you know, hardly any gravel trap. He'd get out of the car with a sort of monotone, relaxed voice, like he hadn't been doing anything. And yet the guy had been, I mean, you see that crazy overtake I saw recently at Mexico he did many years ago. And I mean, just to put in perspective, if he had not made that clean, he could have lost his life on that overtake. I mean, that's how crazy that was. That was a brick wall on the outside of that corner at 200 mile an hour. I mean, my goodness me. So Kimi does share that essence of the world is in slow motion compared to their vision. But either way, I think sometimes you do want to hear a bit of fire. Perhaps he does need a fire lit under him to really, show what he's capable of. But either way, they're both world champions. A good pairing there. And I just want to see Kimi do what we know. And perhaps if he has the right car. I mean, even when I think he was talking a lot about he was having problems with force feedback on his steering for a long time. And, you need the car set up in a way that suits you. And then you can really drive it. Otherwise, if it's just not set up right, then you're just not going to be able to maximise yourself at the limit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that's the top three teams: Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari. And we're not going to kid ourselves. The title for both the constructor and the drivers is going to come from one of those six drivers and one of those three teams. So let's move on to perhaps the surprise. As you might have noticed, I'm going in constructor order as they finished in 2016. And the fourth place last year was Force India. Great performance by them last year, and the pink beast, should we call it, as they're going to be in this year. It'd be great to see them continue that performance, really. But change in lineup. Checo remains. Sergio Perez will probably be the lead driver. But joining him is Esteban Ocon, who came over from Manor, and is part of the Mercedes stable of drivers, but was the preferred choice over Pascal Wehrlein, who went on to Sauber, and we'll come over to him towards the end of this podcast. But Checo and Esteban are the lineup. Force India said, it's great to see a new sponsor coming on board for that team, and if for any team at the moment to get a new title sponsor, if they can do it, then what the hell are McLaren doing?
Well,
but again, we'll come on to McLaren. We'll probably spend far too long on McLaren. But anyway, we're talking about Force India. Sergio Perez is a quality driver. Apparently, he had first dibs on the Renault drive that Hulkenberg took, but he saw more potential remaining with Force India. So if he can continue what he was doing, and he's been able to get more than one podium in recent seasons with that team. So if the package is there, then I can't see that stopping. Esteban Ocon, he's a bit of an unknown quantity. I genuinely thought that Pascal Wehrlein was a better driver, but we'll see what Ocon can bring. He's still relatively a rookie, so it is a bit of a risk for Force India. Bear in mind that they've let Hulkenberg go, who was a very sort of stable driver. But I think it's going to be an interesting year for Force India. Whether they can hold off Williams, who will be on their heels, we'll see. But
well, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, the Pink Beasts. We haven't seen their overalls yet. Let's wait and see what they look like. Yeah, we've been seeing the Pink Panther meme going around, but it'd be interesting to see the overalls. I'm looking forward to. But either way, I think Perez is someone who's had some spectacular races, but consistently, he's not necessarily been the most consistent driver. I still feel that Perez needs an experienced driver in that team to push him. He's now the lead driver, and maybe being the lead driver will help push him further. He'll take that team forward. So a great result last year. I'm always very pleased to see teams come in and get those kind of results. They fought hard for that last year. Esteban's really got to prove himself, but I think in essence they have a solid outfit, and I think the drivers will deliver if they have the opportunity this year. So I see no reason why they won't continue, providing they have reliability in the car. I think there's no reason why they shouldn't be somewhere in there in the top tens. Certainly fighting for points.
Absolutely. So moving on to Williams, who the welcome return of Felipe Massa. I don't think they had any choice because there was no other sort of experienced driver coming into the team. partnering Lance Stroll, the Canadian son of a wealthy parent. But anyway, we'll have separate thoughts about that. But I think one thing to note about Williams is the return, should we say, of Paddy Lowe, who's coming into the team at the board level, but also heading the technology side of the technical side of the business, coming over from Mercedes. I think it's a great thing for Paddy. It's great for Williams. Frank Williams, sadly, we haven't seen much of him over the past year. And obviously Claire, his daughter, has taken more of a lead on the commercial side. So perhaps Paddy, this is more of a team leadership role, possibly, as well as technical. But we'll see how that relationship develops. But 2016 was a bad year for Williams. You know, to be overtaken by Force India. No disrespect to Force India, but Williams have been in the sport for a long time. They should really be in the same group as Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari. But they for some reason they just seem to be missing something, and it's that performance. I'm not sure whether Felipe Massa and Lance Stroll is the right lineup for them right now, but 2017 will be a challenging year.
Paddy Lowe's coming into the team. His impact on this year's car will be minimal, but his goal will be to restructure the team in terms of working practices so that they're in a better shape for next year and beyond. I expect Williams to switch their development over to their 2018 car quite soon this season, and really structure everything to build on that. They've gone for Felipe and Lance. Obviously, they need the cash to develop the car they want to develop. In terms of driver lineup, for me, it's the least convincing driver lineup by far so far. I think Felipe, he retired. I think in terms of Felipe's driving, let's just look at his career for a second. When he first came in Sauber, he was known as the rally driver. He would work too hard at the wheel. He was a bit all over the place. Then he learnt a lot from Michael Schumacher. And he became much smoother. And really, he was driving at his best in 2007 and 2008. He had some great results. But following the incident in 2009, the crash at the Hungaro Ring, when the piece came off Rubens Barrichello's car, he's never really been at his best since. And he's had some very good results here and there, but a lot of them have been down to circumstance around rather than his sort of thrilling overtakes, if you like, going into it. So, I think in terms of his ability, I think again he'll lead the team. He'll put in a solid result for Williams. But where Lance is concerned, he's a complete unknown. It's going to be tough for him this year. And I just feel that this year is going to be a bit of a struggle for Williams. I think they've got a lot happening around them, and we'll have to see whether those two drivers can deliver. But I think they've got a tough year. It really depends on how close. I mean, they've looked good at testing at times, but that means nothing in terms of when they've got the parts on the car. I still think they're going to be battling with Force India quite a bit in terms of Williams. Yep. So we'll see.
And I think just on that, I mean, Felipe Massa's got a lead. He's, in my eye, he's a very strong number 2 driver.
Yeah.
And that's the big question mark.
Yeah.
So, but Lance Stroll, is he more than just a well-funded paid driver, or is he going to be another Maldonado?
It's very difficult to say, isn't it? I mean, there's nothing convincing about his career or anything he's done yet, and I don't know. I just think that it's okay when you've got a very strong lead driver, who's a clear number 1, and you want a number 2 to support that number 1 driver. But this year it doesn't really feel like they have a lead driver in that sense. And Massa will take the lead, but like you say, he's not where he is right now. He's not where he was in 2008 for sure. And I think again, it's 1 year and he's retiring again. I assume so. Yeah. We'll see.
My tip for 2018 is assuming there'll be no change at Red Bull, Carlos Sainz will be at Williams in 2018. That's my tip.
We'll see. Carlos is one of the most exciting drivers in Formula One, not being recognised right now.
Absolutely.
So, I would like to see him with a decent team and a decent car. There's no doubt about it. You'd seeing Max, but Carlos was pegging him point for point. A bit like Jean-Eric Vergne was competing with Daniel Ricciardo, and Jean-Eric Vergne's not in Formula One now. What a waste of a great talent. As of this weekend, though, apparently he's been picked up by Manor for WEC. So he'll be in the World Endurance Championship racing for Manor now. But again, the guy should be in Formula One. He was pegging Daniel Ricciardo. And hell, if Williams had, Jean-Eric Verne and Carlos Sainz, I think that would be
very strong,
a great lineup there. So, it's one of those things, isn't it? But it's not about who you are. It's a little bit about who your dad is as well. And Lance has got a persuasive dad, so we'll have to see if that results in some good results for Williams.
Right, time to take a deep breath. McLaren Honda. It hurts. It really does. And I think whether you're a McLaren fan or not, any fan of Formula One, it's just so painful to see the state that McLaren is in. And I think that the most cutting comment was by David Croft from Sky Sports at the end of testing in Barcelona the other week. He said, if McLaren can qualify within 107% in Melbourne, they will consider themselves lucky.
Yeah.
107%. I didn't know that rule still existed. That is just not on for Honda.
No, it's a dreadful situation. I mean, the 107% rule was brought in years ago when you had like the 40s and Minardis and 40s that were way off the pace. Okay, 10 seconds a lap off the pace, this kind of stuff. I mean, they were lapped 4 or 5 times in a race. And so they brought in this rule because of the drastic speed difference. It was too far off. With McLaren, I mean, it's been a torrid couple of years. Jenson Button has left, a waste of an incredible lineup in Jenson Button and Fernando Alonso for 2 years. We would love to have seen them at the front battling for victories. It's where they belong. World champions, battling for those victories. Instead, doddering about in the middle of the pack, driving the wheels off the thing but getting nowhere. This year, we've got the new spec Honda engine, which is supposed to be in a similar design philosophy to the Mercedes. And we've had the car breaking down left, right and centre every single day. Electrical problem after electrical problem. Honda saying that they had the wrong shaped fuel tank on the first day. How does that happen? Oh, G-forces are affecting the engine. Well, who'd have thought that? And, now they're saying vibration could be affecting it. I mean, aren't you guys testing this? What are you... I mean, they've got billions of pounds at Honda to test all this equipment, as have McLaren in their space age facility in Woking. And we're talking about an engine suffering from G-force and vibration. I mean, these are two elements which seem to me common sense in a Formula One car. What it says is that Honda don't seem to know what the problem is, that they're probably going to have to run at low power in Melbourne, and obviously Fernando will be lucky to finish the race even at low power. The last engine they had didn't work well on its fuel. It didn't work well with its engine with its electricity and electrical capacity systems. So it makes you wonder what's gone on. I mean, how can they get it so wrong? People say that's all that we keep hearing. How can you get it so wrong? I think this test we were hoping, is McLaren going to be back? They should be battling for world championships. And it's funny. I took a photograph when I was in the paddock a couple of years ago and they have this wall with all of their world championships. The last time they won it was 98 was the last constructors world championship. 19 years since McLaren. Who would have thought that? I mean, you don't even think about McLaren as not being a constructor. We see them as a world championship team. They've not actually been a world championship team in terms of constructors.
And let's be honest, the last drivers' championship was 2008.
Yeah,
that's coming up for 10 years.
Yeah, it's coming. So it'll be 10 years and 20 years respectively. And it was, I just think it's amazing where McLaren have they've been so close, but for various different reasons, they've not achieved the success they should have over the years.
They're going the same way as Williams at the moment.
They are. They're in a very bad place at the moment. Ron has gone now. There's been a change of management. I maybe we're asking too much, because don't forget, this is still a Ron Dennis team car that we're seeing here this year. What's strange is Eric Boullier spent a lot of his time in Japan last year, apparently liaising with the Japanese to produce this engine and to get through some of the red tape because the corporate culture there, things are moving very slowly, not fast enough for Formula One, which is kind of amazing, really, when you look at their success in MotoGP and other various sorts of motorsports. They know what it takes to make a great engine, a competitive vehicle. They have the heritage, they have the people, they have the experience. And that's why we come back to this. How are they getting it so wrong? And of course, Fernando Alonso, arguably the best driver for me, is the best driver on the grid. I've just not, I just want to see him with a great car to get pole positions and win races when his car's good enough. I want to see him be able to race. And unfortunately, this year it looks like another waste of that guy's career. Yeah,
it is, and I think a few points there. I mean, beginning to wonder whether take Jensen. Did he start to see what was going to happen in 2017?
I think he did.
Alonso's tied into a contract, so he probably, and he's on a very nice, well-paid contract. Let's not ignore that. But Button thought, perhaps I can delay my final year of my contract to 2018. Perhaps they might make something good by that point. One Denton, I think what's quite funny though is that one person in Formula One that I really liked and really respected was Martin Whitmarsh. That he was given the boot, quite a few years ago. McLaren haven't won a race ever since Martin Whitmarsh left, and let's not ignore that point as well. Lots have been written about Ron Dennis in terms of how he has run the McLaren company, not just the team, the company, and it's. Things move on, and the way to run companies, certainly Formula One, I think, has changed as well. And you look at the cultures of Mercedes and Red Bull, particularly. It's you look at them and think it's much more of a collaborative team. I still feel that McLaren, from the outside, looks like it's been run by how it was back in the 90s. And things move on, lifestyles change. So. Interested to see what Zach Brown does in terms of changing the feel look of McLaren. I got first sort of grumblings of, oh my god, here we go again, when they revealed the livery. Really disappointing.
Yeah, the livery.
I like the fact that they've gone for an orange colour, although some pictures make it look red, but where was the real sort of sunset orange that you had on the MP412C?
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to see.
Yeah.
But do it on the whole colour. Make the whole car that colour, not this really, quite frankly, shitty looking sort of loop that they've got. And you look at the top down, you've got this black splodge around where the cockpit is, and it's like, it just looks naff. I'm sorry. It's like, I'm no marketing PR guru, but I can come up with a better design than that.
Yeah, it is. I have to say, when they pulled the sheet off and showed the car, and I just looked at it and thought, well, it looks like a Manor GP. It's a dreadful paint job. Who are you getting to paint your cars? Designers are absolutely terrible design. And I looked at it and thought, what does this say about McLaren right now? Because the car image says everything about the team, and to think that they think that's a good design,
you only have to do one Google image search for McLaren concept livery, and you come up with some absolutely stunning fan-made liveries, and I'm thinking, they look cool. I mean, it's like when Force India revealed their pink look the other day. I was like, that's a fun livery. Renault, that's a sexy looking car. And even like the Toro Rosso, which we'll come on to a bit, but cool looking livery. McLaren, oh god.
Yeah, I know. It's they pulled that livery. I mean, admittedly, the Renault guys look like they're wearing a pair of pajamas now with the yellow bottoms.
True, fair point.
But and it's funny with Nico coming out with that the other day, and I thought, well, goodness me, have you seen your overalls, Nico? No, it's so disappointing to see what and Eric Boullier reckons they have a good chassis this year. Well,
we won't see that, will we?
We don't. Who knows, Eric? There's no point even saying that, is there? I mean, your chassis could be terrible as well. But clearly there's something with the Honda engine. And Honda are on. They're talking about sounding out Mercedes at McLaren. Like you say, it's probably more. Just talk to give Honda a kick up the bum. But Honda know that this is the year. They have got to make it happen. And Honda's reputation depends on them turning it around this year. So, let's wait and see. I mean, we don't know what the power of the Honda engine is because they've never run it above a low setting. And if you think they were a low setting, they weren't too bad at a low setting. If they turn that up, they'd probably be in the 1 minute 19s already. So they'd have moved. They'll still be a second off the pace, but they won't be 3 or 4 seconds off the pace if they can get the engine switched on. But I think a very difficult few away races from McLaren. It might mean that we don't have a new spec engine until they come to Europe. I expect Honda will introduce something new at the Spanish Grand Prix. It's Alonso's home Grand Prix. He's going to want something new there. And my goodness, they need to deliver. I think if they haven't delivered, then they'll be losing Alonso at the end of the season. That's for sure. So
perhaps we'll see Alonso at Williams at this rate. Alonso's science at Williams. Bring it on. Okay, well, I'm sure we could probably talk about McLaren for another hour. But we wish them the best of luck. I think it'll be great to see. We just want to see them back on the podium. We want to see them up there. We don't want to see this anymore. Van Dorn, we haven't spoken about him. I think he's probably thinking, "Oh God, what have I come into?" But he's largely a rookie driver. I know he drove at Bahrain last year, deputising for Alonso. But we'll see what he can bring.
I think solid. Van Dorn's always been solid. I think he's going to be a good solid driver for the team. So I think McLaren's lineup is still excellent. They've got 2 drivers there that can win Grand Prix with the right machinery.
And the reserve is Button.
Well,
which is not bad.
No, exactly. So they've got a solid lineup. I mean, everything's in place at McLaren. Apparently they have a good chassis. They've got the drivers. And really they just need this Honda engine to come through. But let's wait and see. I think that, like you say, they'll be lucky to finish at Melbourne at this stage. But you never know. If Honda can find the problem, then they can fix it. We start from there. So.
Absolutely. So we come on to the smaller teams on the grid, starting off with the sister Red Bull outfit, Toro Rosso. As I said, great, sexy livery. Really great to see a slight difference this year. So at least we can actually tell the cars apart properly on the track. Carlos Sainz, quality driver. I personally rate him higher than Max Verstappen, but time will tell whether we'll see him in a high grid team. I'm sure we will at some point, but he's destined for another season at Toro Rosso. But the biggest surprise for me, probably on the whole grid, is Daniel Kvyat got a stay of execution, really, didn't he? I mean, 2016, let's be honest, it was not a great year for him. Started off at Red Bull, got the sack after punting off Vettel at Sochi. He was, as Helmut Marko says, Red Bull have 4 drives in Formula One, and they can move their drivers around any time.
Yeah.
And Kvyat was moved. I'm not a fan. I mean, in terms of personality, he's the most dry guy on the grid.
I've no interest. I mean, I've bumped into Kvyat in real life. I find him to be very dull. I found him to be, for me, the dullest pay driver on the grid. I just saw him as a pay driver. I really didn't see. Yes, he's part of the Red Bull driver program. Yes, he's shown some talent. He moved up and adapted very well on and he had some great races coming through to Formula One. But I found him to be, his attitude was wrong at Red Bull last year. It was very cocky, and he wasn't really listening to the team. He wasn't respectful, I felt, of the team. And so he got demoted, and it's only down to the fact that he has good backing, good money, and he's part of the Red Bull program that he's still there, and we don't know the contracts that lie beneath. But Toro Rosso, I will just say, fantastic looking car, fantastic looking livery, certainly the most racy looking car on the grid. Love the look of it. We hope Carlos has a reasonable time there this year. The testing has been pretty abysmal for them, though, unfortunately. They've been right there with McLaren, seemingly having problems every day. Let's wait and see when they turn it around. I mean, Toro Rosso they've had good results from time to time, but it might depend on weather conditions, everything else for those drivers to shine more this year. Kvyat, I think, I still think he's on borrowed time in the sport. I think that depending on how he gets on this year, I think he'll be replaced at some point, but we'll see. If he has a great year and good results, but if Carlos really beats him into the ground, then I think Kvyat could be gone in the future. Either way, he's not someone that doesn't have star appeal, does he? In that sense.
No, not at all, sadly. Okay, so moving on to the newest team on the grid, Haas. Brilliant first year. Their first few races were amazing, quite frankly. Fair play. They've stolen, I think even in Gene Haas's words, we took as much as we could out of the Ferrari and put it into a car to define it as our own. But they followed the rules and they got away with it. So Grosjean remains quality driver and has certainly grown over the last few years into being a sort of stable, good driver in the team. And Magnussen has joined over from Renault on a multi-year contract as well. So I think it's a good lineup at Haas. I think they obviously they petered off after about sort of 6 races last year, but again they switched focus onto the 2017 car really early on, and they did not have any updates at all for the lion's share of 2016. So I look with interest with Haas. I expect them to have a reasonable year, certainly strong mid-pack team, and probably getting into the higher points at points, higher half of the points table at times during the year, and watch them with interest.
Yeah, Haas last year, I think, very impressive. Got those points early in the season. They got the points that probably their target points, and then said, right, we've achieved what the best we're going to achieve this year. We're going to move on to next year. I think Gutierrez never star talent for me in F1, and I think that this year with Magnussen, he's displayed his potential in the past. I think they're a stronger lineup. Grosjean years ago was a crasher, but he's turned himself around. Grosjean always had speed. It's just that now and again he had a bit of, he would twitch around in the car, was a bit unpredictable, and that's no good in Formula One cars. You need to be relatively predictable in terms of how you place yourself. In testing has been okay. They've been having some brake issues and stuff in testing. Grosjean would really like them to find a new brake supplier. They've clearly got a lot of work to do in testing, but again, I think a solid mid-pack team, and I think, again, we don't really know the performance of these teams, these mid-pack teams. I think they could all be very close. It really depends when we get to Australia in terms of what modifications they put on the car, but their target will be to do the same thing this year, to have the best possible car they can in the first 6-7 races, while teams adjust to the new rules, and they know they have opportunities, and of course weather comes into play as well. So let's see. It's good to have new teams, and if you look at new teams, you look at Caterham and Manor and all the rest of them that have come in. This has been the best new team entry in the sport for some time. Those Ferrari parts certainly help.
Absolutely.
But we needed that for a US team. In fact, we need more US teams in Formula One. So let's hope they have a good season.
And it could definitely be the template for new teams coming into the sport moving forward.
Absolutely, yeah.
So moving on to Renault, which obviously let's not forget they are a works team. Obviously they took on a disjointed team at the end of 2015. So 2016 was always only ever going to be let's just get through the season with what we've got. But 2017 poses perhaps the first proper look into what Renault can start to bring. They wanted a star driver to lead their force, and they took on Nico Hülkenberg, who, let's not forget, he is a Le Mans 24-hour winner. He's never stood on an F1 podium, which is baffling, still today. So hopefully that will change soon. And I'm personally delighted to see Jolyon Palmer be kept on for a second year at Renault. Let's not forget as well, he is a GP2 champion. And I like to see GP2 champions get their fair share in the sport.
We should see more of that.
Yeah. And it's been great to see, just on a side note, that GP2 has been rebranded as Formula 2, which is really exciting as well, I think, for the growth. So hopefully we'll see that GP3 will be rebranded as Formula 3, which will make sense. But anyway, again, part of the Liberty Media influences coming through. But back to Renault, I'm quite excited. Really sexy looking car. Let's ignore the pajama look driver outfits. All they need is just like a yellow stripe all the way up to the top, or
Yeah.
I'm no fashion expert, but come on,
Yeah.
who designs these things? It's
I know.
crazy.
Fisherman's trousers I've seen. It's a bizarre look, isn't it?
Yeah. But Hulkenberg, great for him. He wants to work for a works team. I can completely understand why you'd want to leave Force India, which no disrespect to them, but fourth, I think, is probably the maximum that Force India can really realistically achieve. Renault do have the resources to potentially win championships. They have before. Back in 2005, 2006, Alonso's 2 titles were with Renault back then. It's effectively the same team. It's the same location. It's still ex-Benetton and all of that group. So, they've got the potential to do this. It won't be 2017. Probably won't be 2018. We're looking 19, 20, 21 possibly to have an attack there. But Hulkenberg can be there from the beginning. Palmer, last year was his rookie season. He put in some fine performances towards the end, and Magnussen, for whatever reason, did not sit well with the Renault hierarchy, and so he went off to Haas. Palmer was the prime seat. So let's look. I'm looking forward to seeing him develop, hopefully stronger this year. The Renault package and testing looks positive. There won't be winning races or anything this year, but again, another strong, probably top end of the mid pack with some strong points finishes.
I think the car looks great. Really nice looking car. I think Nico Hulkenberg is a great driver who's never had a great car. He's never had he's had opportunity. He never really had the opportunity. I mean, these last 3 years, we've just had Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari. If you're not in one of those cars, it's very little chance that you're going to actually get anywhere. So he's not been in the right place at the right time. Happens like this. There's a lot of F1 drivers who have been great F1 drivers and haven't really had the chance to be on a podium or win a Grand Prix. So he's definitely somebody with the potential.
Maldonado.
Well, exactly. The one-off Maldonado. And for a Williams anniversary as well. What a coincidence. Anyway, so Renault, I think the testing's been... The car's got speed, but they need to work on the reliability. They've had a lot of reliability issues in testing. I think, again, a much more solid car this year. Jolie and Palmer, again, I was really glad to see him get another chance, because last year's car was just not the opportunity for him to show his potential. He had a lot of bad luck as well last year. So I think... testing has been good for them, and there is a good vibe in that team I've seen as well. They all seem quite happy. They all seem like they're moving forward, and I think that, listen, Renault have got the potential to really shake things up, and Renault also believe that their 2018 engines will be on par with Mercedes. They reckon they'll finally get there. So, I would say Nico, I don't know how long his agreement is with the team, his contract, but he'll be looking to. I think, providing this driver pairing get on, they'll be looking to take that team forward over the next 2-3 years. So Renault really want to see them do well, and I think they will this year.
And of course, let's not forget, Renault is the works engine. Red Bull, it's a Tag Heuer engine, but it's a Renault engine. So when the Renault works team are on form, there might just be a little bit of a delay giving the same engine to Red Bull.
Shh. We don't tell anyone that.
Okay, so the last team on the grid, and it's their 25th year in the sport, Sauber. It's great to see some new investment coming into there. Again, a really nice, refined livery this year after last year's abysmal livery, which was the worst on the grid, I think. So it's nice to see the nice little bit of polish there. Should we see lots of white splodges though on the car? They do still need more investment, but more sponsors. But the people that are bankrolling the team now are giving them sort of some longevity.
They've had to hang in there, Sauber. It's been tough. Manisha's, always pushing the point about the funding and the lack of, we know the ridiculous situation. It's how funding's handled in Formula One. The money that goes to the top teams, it doesn't go to the teams at the back, even if they get the same results. It's completely unfair. But Sauber have held in there, and I think this year is about, they need to get a championship point this year. I think they're going to be battling to get a couple of points here and there. I think it's going to be, if they're going to get points, it'll be in the first half of the season. I think that, like we were talking about Haas, they're banking on the fact that McLaren aren't in a good place, Renault aren't in a good place. This gives us a chance. As the season goes on, I have no doubt that McLaren and Renault will start increasing their performance, and it's going to get difficult to score points from then on as the teams get consistent. So they've got their work cut out this year, but let's hope they can hang in there, because there will be changes, and no doubt Ross will bring those in due course. But it's great to see them still in there after these years. Good results over the years. And if you look at the drivers that have driven for that team, some big drivers have driven for Sauber over the years. Yeah, exactly. You're Johnny Herbert, but you have Felipe Massa, of course. John Lacey. I mean, you've had a few drivers there, so it's just a matter of keeping going for them this year and hanging in there.
Absolutely. And in terms of that lineup, I mean, Ericsson, he's a bit of a non-entity, quite frankly. And that's probably sorry if you're listening to this, but I'm waiting for him to do something. Van Pascal Wehrlein, I mean, Mercedes needed to place him somewhere. Unfortunately, he was looked aside for the Mercedes drive, but he's still a young guy, so let him learn his racecraft there. There might be opportunities further up the grid.
Yeah, I mean, not a great testing for them as a team. Yeah. They've failed to put in good pace. Pascal Wehrlein, of course, I don't think he's tested the car at all, because since his crash at the Race of Champions, which was quite a confusing incident. I actually missed why it happened, but he felt he had to cross over when he didn't, and it was all a bit of a mess. And I felt no one's actually talked about the passenger in his car.
That's true,
I kind of felt for. I mean, if you've got in that car and you're like, oh wow, I'm getting in a car with a really good racing driver, this is going to be brilliant. Concussion in hospital. No one talks about that person, And I thought, well, what about the passenger? I mean, he was on the side that was at the top. He was all right. The passenger, they had to roll the car over before they got them out. But I mean. I think he needs to prove himself this year. He needs a consistent year. Esteban has a very rigid haircut, I will point out as well. He always looks very sort of square, ready for duty. He gets a bit angsty when things are not the way he wants them to be. I've seen that from time to time. And I think Sauber's actually had a crash together last year over a silly situation. But, they just need to knuckle down, work as a team. It's not about who's the better driver. It's just about finishing races and being on the track to score points when the potential comes. Again, especially in bad weather, if there's rain, something like that, it can really mix up the grid. So let's hope they've got something in this first few races and get those vital World Championship points.
Absolutely, and that kind of runs up the team really. For 2017, all the drivers, all the teams for this season.
Yeah, well, thanks. Well, like you say, that's it on all of that. I mean, an interesting and exciting year in store, I think, 2017. Thanks for your time today, Tim. And as I say, viewers, we're going to be looking forward to covering more F1 on the channel in the future. We're going to be looking in terms of photographs and videos. There might not be as many in this in this podcast as there will be to come. But we'll be working hard to cover it and expand a lot more racing news on the website, more news on the forum, and of course a lot more on the F1 game as well. And we are going to be back to covering that as well as regular blogs and updates. But that's it from us. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast today. Do let us know your feedback, like and subscribe, and there'll be more from us very soon. But that's it from me for now. As ever, more soon.